I'm News 5's Chad Petrie, live out here in Biloxi. We're waiting for the start of this news conference for this news conference from the NTSB. We're kind of waiting for it to start. We thought it would start at noon. It's running a little bit late. I see at least one or two people from the NTSB starting to gather around, local law enforcement as well. So we're expecting some sort of update. If I could get Amber Gerard to come over to the camera here just to operate things, make sure everything is quite right. If you could get behind the camera, Amber, that'd be great. What we're doing here is just talking to our Facebook audience right now. So we are live on WKRG's Facebook fan page at the moment. What we're doing here is just trying to give you an idea of what we have happening here. There's a lot of cameras. It's rare for there to be an event that attracts this much media attention in the region. This has attracted, of course, stations from New Orleans, Mobile, Biloxi area, also national news as well. We're waiting an update from the officials here at the NTSB. They've started to gather a little bit, but we're just waiting for whoever's in charge of this to really just kick things off. The prevailing hypothesis right now as to why this happened, how this happened, is that it is possible that the driver either didn't see or didn't know about the low clearance warnings on the train tracks and that the train was stuck. And if you'll notice some of the video that we've shown previously on this is that the train tracks are up on a hill essentially, and it's kind of a sharp hill. It's not designed to handle commercial traffic. That's why there are warning signs around it. And when I asked the city spokesman, hey, do you think there's a danger at that intersection, he was very quick to jump in. We have a protected intersection there. We consider this a protected intersection. We say that there are ample signs, ample warnings around this intersection to let commercial truck drivers and others who have very large vehicles know that their vehicle's weight may not necessarily be supported or be able to get through that intersection because it's such a steep hill. It's essentially putting the train tracks up on a point, and you've probably seen this in different places if you've driven in areas where there are train tracks. I've seen this a lot in Mobile County, Washington County, Connecticut County. If you drive along the train tracks, you'll notice that the train tracks are somewhat elevated from the road, and so if you try to cross them, they're on somewhat of a hill. Now, in some of those train crossings, they do warn vehicles that there's a low clearance. Now, if your load is too heavy, that could cause a problem if you're trying to get over those train tracks. And the other thing I noticed just from that intersection alone is that even some drivers, if they take that hill too fast, they're going to bottom out and scratch the bottom of their vehicle. What we were dealing with on Tuesday was a much more serious situation where a bus was stuck on those train tracks, not able to move in time, and in the end 4 people were killed, several more people were injured. Now we're still waiting on the NTSB to kind of tell us how did this happen, why did this happen, and what can we learn from this after this incident. But for right now, we are just basing this on the initial speculation, the information that we've gotten from people who survived this crash or saw it. Also, one thing we want to point out is that this is an intersection where incidents like this have happened before. Apparently, just about 2 months ago, there was a Pepsi delivery truck that got stuck on the train tracks. The driver was able to get out before he was hurt, but the same situation where you have a large commercial vehicle that gets stuck on the tracks. So one of the things I'm going to do is just step out of the way for just a moment. I'd like Amber Gerard to kind of pan around just a little bit, kind of show us the setup that we have here. I was mentioning a few minutes ago that we are talking about national news at this point, and this is one of those stories that's going to be seen all over the country tonight. We've got television stations again from New Orleans, Biloxi, Mobile represented here, so a very far-reaching. Also, there's at least one television station as far away as Houston here. So we're waiting on that news conference to start for the NTSB to really give us an update. This is really our first federal official update on this crash in a while. Now, the NTSB did hold a news conference super early this morning at about 5:20 this morning, talking about what they were going to do today. Basically what they said first thing in the morning is that they were sending out their GO team to Biloxi. The GO team would meet with local officials and then fan out over the scene as well. I'd also like to call in News 5's Allison Spann, who was out here on the accident yesterday. She can give us a little bit more insight about what we saw yesterday. Allison, you were here yesterday when the crash happened. Tell me about how far back you guys had to be just first to cover it, because we are just right on that crash site.
Right, so right where we're at right now is the initial point of impact where that bus and the train collided. Now, where we were at yesterday is actually about 2 city blocks up at this next crossing. I don't know if Amber can zoom in and show you. There's another railroad crossing right up here, and we were all the way back there. Now, you can imagine what this impact was like for this train to be able to push that bus for 2 city blocks. Chad?
One of the things that we just got word of, it looks like the NTSB officials are getting closer to the podium now. At least a couple of guys with badges are getting closer. I believe they'll round up and they will get the news conference started. So what we're going to do is I'm going to throw it over, switch out microphones here as we get this news conference started, and we'll be carrying this on Facebook and on WKRG. I'm News 5's Chad Petrie.
An update on the NTSB's investigation into the grade crossing accident. Robert, S-U-M-W-A-L-T, Sumwalt.
Well, good afternoon.
Down in front, please.
My name is Robert Sumwalt, and I'm a board member with the National Transportation Safety Board. And the NTSB investigators have arrived in Biloxi early this morning. In fact, we had one of our investigators arrive last evening from Texas. But we have landed here to begin our investigation into this grade crossing collision that occurred right here in Biloxi. The NTSB, everyone associates the NTSB with aviation accidents, and we certainly do that. But we are an independent federal agency. We're charged by Congress to investigate transportation accidents of all modes, to determine the probable cause, and then, most importantly, issue safety recommendations to prevent those accidents from happening again. So we investigate all aviation accidents and then selected accidents in other modes of transportation. Before I go on, I'd like to acknowledge and extend our sincere condolences to those who've been affected by this tragedy. Our thoughts and prayers truly go out to them. When we arrived this morning, we've brought in a full NTSB investigative go team, and I'll talk about that. When we arrived this morning, we started coordinating with the local officials, the City of Biloxi Police Department, and the emergency responders, the fire department, as well as just preliminary meetings with CSX. Here's the factual information that we have so far, bearing in mind that we've literally just arrived and we're just beginning our investigation. Just to refresh, yesterday at about 2:15 in the afternoon, Tuesday, March the 7th, a Van Hool motor coach operated by Echo Transportation of Dallas, Texas, was traveling northbound on Main Street in Biloxi toward the grade crossing at Main and Esters, which of course is right here, Esters Boulevard. In advance of the grade crossing, there was a sign that indicated a humped crossing, as we call it, which means low clearance, low ground clearance. There were 49 passengers and 1 driver on the bus. As the bus traveled over the hump where the railroad track is, it reportedly became stuck on the track. Determining the length that that bus sat on those tracks will be critical to this investigation. Now the train train was a CSX freight train en route from New Orleans to Waycross, Georgia. It had 3 locomotives on the front end, 52 cars of mixed freight, and 2 crew members aboard. That would be an engineer and a conductor, which is the standard complement for a freight train. As the train is coming eastbound down the track, the train crew placed the train into emergency. That's emergency stop. The crew placed the train into emergency stop when it was about 510 feet prior to the bus. The speed at the time of the emergency brake application, approximately 26 miles per hour. At the time of the collision, the train had reduced its speed to about 19 miles per hour. So at the collision, we're calling it 19 miles per hour. The bus was pushed by the train about 200 feet. We measured it today, so it's right at about 203 feet. Preliminary reports from the first responders indicate there were 4 fatalities. Those were, of course, the bus occupants. The train crew, to my understanding, was not physically injured. I want to emphasize that we are working alongside and in conjunction with the City of Biloxi Police Department, and we very much appreciate their support and their cooperation. They're conducting their investigation as they normally would do if the feds weren't here, and we're conducting our investigation as we're authorized by Congress to do. So we're operating independent investigations, but we are sharing information, and that's the way we work when we go into accidents. The NTSB's investigator in charge for this accident is Pete Katowski, and that's K-O-T-O-W-S-K-I, K-O-T-O-W-S-K-I. Pete has over 40 years of investigative experience. Mr. Katowski is leading a multidisciplinary team of experts, and the team will consist of expertise in the following areas. The bus operations. We'll be looking at the motor carrier itself. What type of record do they have? We'll be looking at the driver's record, the driver's training, his employment records, his health records. And he's not required to, but we would certainly hope that we could interview him as well. That would give us a very important perspective. We've got railroad experts here. We'll be looking at hopefully interviewing the train crew. We'll be looking at the signals to see if they were functioning properly. We'll be looking at the crossing gates, again, to see if they're functioning properly, and the overall operation of the train. The highway factors. There is a hump, crossover, and then it drops down. That creates the hump. We're very interested in measuring that hump, documenting it, surveying it, understand the geometry of that hump. We want to look at the signage and markings that were in place, that were before the hump. And we're very interested in any prior problems that may have been at this particular grade crossing. Our preliminary information shows that since 1976, there have been, not including yesterday's crash, but since 1976, there have been 16 vehicle-to-train collisions at this crossing prior to this one. There was one fatal collision in 2003. There was a fatal collision in 1983, and then, of course, the event yesterday. I think most of you know, yes, in January there was a tractor-trailer truck that apparently became bottomed out on this same track that resulted in a collision with the train. I'm sorry, that was a Pepsi-Cola truck, not a tractor-trailer truck. But in August of 2014, there was a tractor-trailer that bottomed out that led to a collision. We will have experts looking at the survival factors, and they will be studying the injuries. They'll be documenting the intrusion into the bus. They'll be trying to document the seat location to see why certain injuries were a certain way while other injuries were different. We want to understand how and when people evacuated the train. Did some people get off prior to the collision? Those are the sorts of things that we will want to know. We'll also want to know about the emergency response as well as the emergency preparation. Recorders. We've brought an expert in from our NTSB's Engineering and Research Division, and they will be looking at the recorders. We know that the train had a forward-facing image recorder on it, so that will be very important. We will send that back to Washington, D.C., where it can be analyzed at the NTSB's Recorders Lab. We don't know at this time whether or not the bus forward image recorders, but we're finding that many carriers these days, many motor carriers do have image recorders, and so we will be seeing what we can. We'll see if there's such an event recorder on this bus. We will download the engine control modules from the bus, so we can determine information from that. While we're talking about recorders, we don't think of cell phones as being recorders, but as we all know, we can get a lot of information from there. So we will see if there's any phone information that the passengers may have had, any surveillance footage that may be from nearby cameras. We know that there's a store right here that has still photographs that are facing out toward the west. So any type of footage like that we will be interested in getting, and I'll tell you in just a moment how we would like to get that. We would like to know if there are any calls made to the railroad to report that a vehicle may have been occupying the tracks. We checked it earlier on the signal mast over here. There is a placard that says if there's a train emergency, basically if there's a vehicle on the tracks, to call the railroad and report this. So we will want to know if there's any such effort to do that. We also have our specialist from the NTSB's Office of Transportation Disaster Assistance. And these are very talented, compassionate people that work with the victims' families, to make sure that their needs are being met. Throughout the next few days, our investigators will work on scene to thoroughly document the accident site and to gather factual information. Our mission is not only to find out what happened, but why it happened. And that's critical, so that we can keep accidents like this, keep tragedies like this from happening in the future. And that's really the reason that we are here, is to learn from this so that it does not happen again. The way I look at it, people always want to know, well, when will you have the accident solved? And we're not here on scene to solve the accident, the crash, the collision. We're here strictly on scene at Biloxi to collect what I call the perishable evidence, the information that goes away with the passage of time. So we're just collecting that information now. We will then take it back to Washington and start piecing together the pieces of the puzzle. Right now, our mission is just to get that information that can go away with the passage of time, like documenting the tracks, the witness marks, the scraping marks that might be in the ground, interviewing witnesses because their memories can change over time. That's what our focus is right now. We're not here to speculate, to conduct analysis, or determine the cause. That will come later. My commitment to you is that as we uncover information over the next day or so, my commitment is that we will brief you on what we are finding. And I suspect we will hold unless there's any substantial information coming out this afternoon, we probably will not have a press briefing this evening, but hopefully we will have substantial information for you tomorrow, and we will have another press briefing. And to find out when we're going to do that, please follow us on Twitter, and that's at NTSB_newsroom. So again, at NTSB_newsroom. I mentioned that we would be interested in any information people may have, whether they're eyewitnesses or whether they have video footage. We would certainly love to hear from those people. We've set up an email address where people can contact us. We're checking it constantly, and that email address is pretty simple. It's witness@ntsb.gov. So again, witness@ntsb.gov. Finally, before I wrap up, I certainly want to thank the first responders for their diligent efforts, also for working with us. Their job is very difficult, and we appreciate everything that they've done. Just a moment, I'll be glad to call for questions when I do. What I'd like for you to do is please raise your hand when I call on you, state your name and your affiliation. So why don't we start with the questions? There's a question right here.
I'm Devin Capero with Fox 10 News in Mobile, Alabama. Do you know if CSX has put out any warnings to its engineers about this specific crossing area since there have been so many problems in the past?
So the question is, do we know if CSX has put out any warnings to its engineers, its train operators, specifically about this grade crossing? And I do not know about that, but we will certainly try to find that answer. There's a question right here.
Yeah, it's Anita Lee with the Sun Herald in Biloxi. I'm wondering if there's been any thought given to closing Main Street to long wheel-based trucks and buses, given this is the third accident here since 2014, and who would make that call, and is that something that's being discussed?
Well, the question is there any discussion at all about basically shutting off this grade crossing? And that is not a decision that would be made by us. That would be a decision that would be made mutually between the city and the railroad itself. But it's so early in the investigation, I don't know what's being discussed in that. But that's the sort of thing that we will be looking at in our final report. There's a question right here.
Can I follow up on her question?
Follow up.
I think part of what she's getting at is it possible that the NTSB will make a recommendation that either long trucks aren't allowed to pass here, or would your agency be in the position to possibly recommend, as some neighbors, families here would like, for this to be regraded or the railroad to be moved? Because there's a lot of concern. Your number that you just shared is startling, that there have been that many accidents at this particular site.
And that was a follow-up question to, what could the NTSB recommend, perhaps closing this? Our investigations are very comprehensive, and there are no holes barred. We recommend what we believe is the best course of action to prevent something like this from happening again. What that recommendation might look like would be presumptuous on my part at this point. It will go through a thorough review, but that is the type of things that our reports often come out with, and I think you had a follow-up.
Have you made recommendations like that in the past at different other locations?
The question is, have we made recommendations like that in the past? And yes, we have. For example, in some locations we have recommended that grade separation may be better. So in other words, separate the railroad tracks from the road. You either go over it or you go under it. So yes, we have done that. We've been in business for for 50 years. April the 1st is our anniversary. And that's exactly the type of thing that the NTSB can do and we have done in the past. Yes, ma'am.
We know that 4 people lost their lives. How many people were injured in the crash?
The question is how many people are injured, and there are unconfirmed reports on that. As you can imagine, sometimes that's a hard thing to nail down. It seems like it'd be difficult. Some people are treated and released and they want to get on with their business, and other people are admitted. It's easier, of course, to find out the people who were admitted because they're still there. But we are trying to narrow that down, and we think we should have that by the end of the day.
Are you looking at the other fatalities, the other incidents? I'm sorry, I'm Jazz, and I'm a local 15 in Mobile. Are you looking at the other tragedies, the other incidents you mentioned in this investigation? Is that a part of your whole investigation?
Are we looking at the other events? We will look to see if there's a disproportionate number of events at this rail crossing. So somebody made a comment earlier, 16 since 1973 sounds like a big number, and it does. We want to look at that and 76? See how 76. Yeah, thank you. We want to go and see how that compares with other grade crossings. It sounds like a lot, but we do want to. Yeah, since 1976 there have been 16, in addition to yesterday, so a total of 17. So we'll look at that and see how that compares. Okay, there's a question here.
John Fitzhugh with the Sun Herald. Also, is there any knowledge of whether the bus company, the tour companies, do they communicate with each other to avoid such intersections?
Yes, the question is there any knowledge or common knowledge or sharing about certain hazards such as this? And you know, a lot of bus companies, a lot of operators will map out a preferred map and preferred route that they've assessed the hazards. They want their drivers to drive a certain road. We're dealing with that right now in an accident that will go to the board next week, that the driver was supposed to drive a certain route, and for whatever reason he was going a different route. So that's part of what our investigation will be. We will want to know what was the preferred route, and if it was not the preferred route, why was the driver on this particular route. So those are the kinds of things that by going to the ECHO Transportation's headquarters, we will interview the people there, the management people there. Again, we hope to interview the driver. There's a question right here.
Mike Lason with WLOX News. I wanted to find out, do you have any suggestions on short-term resolutions to this? I know that the investigation could be a long time, but is anything in the short term today? Do we have any short-term recommendations? And there'll be nothing coming out today. Our process is that if we find an imminent hazard, something that needs immediate corrective action, we have the capability, and we do exercise it, to come out with an urgent recommendation. So that's part of our process, and we don't hesitate to use that urgent authority. Yes, sir.
Who's responsible for the intersection?
Who's responsible for that? And it's complicated. Who is responsible for this grade crossing? It is a shared responsibility between the railroad and the local jurisdiction. In this case, it's the city of Biloxi, and it's not cut and dried. And so we want to make sure that we clearly understand whose responsibility that is, and that's part of what we will do. Yes, sir.
Mayor Popo Gillis.
Hello, Mayor.
Two key things you touched upon was the geometry of the crossing, and as well as sensors that, technology. I'm sure in your investigation you've seen this in similar situations. And what can be done? Prevention is my main goal. I've been here all my life and known 3 friends personally that have passed away on these railroad tracks. And I know geometry of crossings have changed, and I would like to, as a result, to share with us, what geometry that makes these things so dangerous, and I think there's some things that the Internet of Things can we use a lot of it on highways. So I mean, it seems a natural path. We hope things will be good out of it. We'll wind up with something good out of this terrible accident. So.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. We'll come question right here.
Christine Dobbins from ABC out of Houston. Based on what you know about the reduction in speed of the train, can you comment on the engineer's actions And did his action prevent perhaps additional loss of life or more injuries?
So can I comment about the reaction of the train engineers? And you know, it's good good line of distance here. Good, you know, there's no obstructions. It's a good straight track. So you know, we will be looking. We will conduct a site, may well conduct a site distance test to see what a reasonable person could have seen, and was that a reasonable reaction time. But those are the types of things that we will do, and so that's part of our investigation. There's a question here. One more question, and this is it.
San Channel 5 in Mobile, you mentioned there had been 16 prior incidents at this particular crossing. Is this the first time you guys have investigated this particular area?
Yes. Is this the first time that the NTSB has investigated this particular grade crossing or other ones in the area? To my knowledge, the answer to that is yes. It's our first time here. We did not investigate. There were 2,500, last year, there were 2,025 grade crossing collisions. 2,025 grade crossing collisions last year in the United States, which led to 265 fatalities. So the NTSB does not investigate each of those. What got our attention here was that there was another event 2 months ago right here. And so we're very interested in that. So again, my commitment, our commitment, the agency's commitment is to learn from this so that we can keep it from happening again. So I want to thank you all for being here. We will try and keep you posted as we're getting information, and that's my commitment to you. Thank you all very much.
How long are you going to be on site, sir?
Probably about 4 days.
4 days. 4 days.
All right, you've been listening to it.
So Anita Lee here at the Sun Herald.
A lot of layers. How am I supposed to know which one's yours?
So no one else is speaking? No one else is going to speak? Oh, God.
Who's this who's?
This is yours.
Well, one is marked down there as
Allison,
DSU.
I think this is yours.
I don't think this is
This is Allison. Take that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh.
Hello, WKRG Facebook fans. As you just heard, we just finished up that NTSB press conference, and we learned quite a few things. That CSX freight train was from New Orleans to Georgia. It had 52 cars and 2 crew members on board, neither of which were injured. The charter bus was coming from Texas, and it had 41 people on board, and then, of course, a driver. Now, it seems NTSB is taking an inkling to this particular location because there have been 16 other incidents at this particular railroad crossing since 1976, but this is the first time that the NTSB has been brought in to investigate this particular area. And he said what brought them here is that there was another accident just 2 months ago, so they are taking a closer look at this particular area due to the high number of incidents that have occurred at this railroad crossing. There was a fatal accident at this crossing in 2003, in 1983, and then of course here in 2017 when 4 people lost their lives when a charter bus was hit by a CSX train going down these railroad tracks. And he said that preliminary reports do show that that charter bus was possibly stuck over the railroad crossing. It possibly bottomed out. Of course, it's very early on in this investigation, and there are a lot of things that we don't know and a lot of things that they don't know yet. They said they're going to be here all day gathering information. They call it perishable evidence, meaning that it's going to go away soon, so they're going to have to gather it all together. They will be taking that back to Washington, D.C. to conclude their full investigation, but they said they should have a press conference again tomorrow morning so that they'll be able to update us on everything that they've found so far. They're going to be looking at things like the debris we have here. If you look in the gravel, I'll get Amber Gerard to pan over to the gravel we have here. You can see where that bus was drug through are pushed by the train. So they're going to be looking at all kinds of things like that. And just in this area that we're in, there's a ton of debris. There's a downed railroad crossing. So there is a lot of evidence here for them to investigate. So as their investigation progresses, News 5 will be here. We will have team coverage on this tragic incident all night tonight. So stay tuned for all of the latest details. For now, reporting live in Biloxi, I'm Allison Spann for News 5. I think there's power down.
Huh?
Power down.
Is that what they said?
Oh, I bet. He does.